Hello, hello, hello. I think that's about right. How's everybody doing today? Are you ready to take a day off? You ready to take more than a day off? Yeah, I'm ready. But before we do that, we're gonna have class as normally scheduled. So basically, today I have sort of some flexible time set aside for today. I have a short sort of agenda of things that I want to show you. I do have like a list of sort of 2 or 3 more advanced topics that y'all might be interested in. So if I don't have enough questions from you, I can kind of go over those things. But let me just begin by kind of orienting us to the course calendar, and then also I'd like to show you the render samples from last class. So we are here. We're on the precipice of Thanksgiving break. Actually, this lecture I probably will not cover today. Although, no, I will. Sorry, just never mind. If we do have time during class, I can show you this video, although I feel like it's a better use of your time and potentially my time to spend the time showing you stuff in Rhino. So the render comparisons from Tuesday, I can just talk to you about kind of briefly. If I just open this Google folder up, it looks like we've got, I might have actually posted the wrong link. Let me just go in really quickly and get into my Google folder. So this is what we should be seeing, and I'll go ahead and just refresh that link right after class. But what we have are 2 renders. One is labeled legacy render, and the other is labeled Rhino render. So I'm going to show you these just off my hard drive real quickly, because I'd like to get them side by side to really show you the difference. So, they're here. And I'm just going to go ahead and open them up in preview so we can take a look at them. Okay, so you can see this right now, the render 3 is actually the legacy render. And actually, strike that. Render 3 is the Rhino render, and then render 2 is done with the legacy render. So the version that you're looking at on the Google Drive, the files are named appropriately. So just to kind of show you, this one's obviously called legacy render. This one's called Rhino render. And that does correspond to the renderer in which I made them. Now, a couple of things to maybe note. First of all, there's a really visible difference in the way that the renderer has interpreted the lighting. So you can see that in the version that is done with the legacy render that we're looking at now, this version has a little bit more contrast. There's a broader difference between the darkest darks and the lightest lights. So what that means, though, is that especially if you look maybe at this area in here, you can see, hopefully you can see it on the projector, that there's a little bit of detail that's kind of missing here because the lights are so light. In other words, the contrast can kind of make for a more like snappy looking or kind of emphatic looking image, but what it sacrifices is detail. So if we come in here to the version made with the Rhino render, you can see that there's a lot more tonal detail. In other words, a lot more sort of tones between white and black. The other major difference that I noticed is that in general, I think, and especially you can really notice this in the thumbnail, the shadows in the version from the legacy render are just like a little harsher. So just to kind of give you an example, like look under here at the shadow under the boat. You can see that it's like really dark and kind of dramatic. And then if we look at the one done with the Rhino render, it's like a lot more subtle, and it's got a lot more sort of subtle variation. So in general, which is better, which is worse? Well, think of it this way. I got this render in about 3 minutes. I think final quality, it took about 3 minutes. This render took about 19 hours. So that was basically just me kind of like going through my day, opening up and closing my laptop. It finished like this morning, and I started rendering it right after class because I don't open my laptop up at night or when it's in my backpack or whatever. So Rhino is smart enough to sort of like pause the render when you're not actually using your laptop. But yeah, it's a really long time. And I think you would be well within your rights to sort of just use the legacy renderer. But I mean, I do want to just sort of make you aware of the fact that certain sort of special effects, such as glass, really shiny things, really transparent things, they might not look as nice. So is it worth it? I think if you finish your project early and you want to spend some time just letting your laptop cook on it for a while, go for it. But it's certainly not a requirement. And let me make a quick note to myself to update that link. So I did promise you all the opportunity to ask questions about Rhino or sort of maybe set some prompts for some update link for Google Drive. Okay, we'll take care of that after class. So are there any sort of like questions or special topics that you'd be interested in having me address today? I can ask you again in a few minutes. So there's a couple more things that I wanted to show you in Rhino, which are just like kind of cool things to do. So one thing is if we make a new document, one thing that I really like doing, and I do a lot in my current work right now, is working with height fields. So a height field is basically just kind of a fancy way of saying you're going to take an image and you're going to use the pixel grid of the image to dictate the height of a 3D surface. So first of all, we have to find an image to make a height field out of. And I have some images on deck, but I'm going to just do a quick search for So it doesn't look like I have any specific height field images. So I'm actually going to use the render that we just made. So I'm going to use this image to generate the height field. Now, what's going to happen when we do that is that basically like all the white tones are probably going to be the high parts, and then all the dark tones are going to be the low parts. So we'll see this image in a kind of a different way. So it's it's not super like difficult to do this. So you go up here in the surface menu to height field from image. And then you have to navigate to your image. And I think I said I would try this render3.jpg. And then it basically asks you to make like a rectangle, which is, because your image is rectangular in this case. So it automatically kind of comes up with the aspect ratio of the image. And then here's the part where you can kind of really play around with it. So right now, the number of sample points it's going to have is we have like if we go back to our image here, you can see our image is, let's see, 1920 by 1080. So over in Rhino, Rhino's asking us how many sample points. So if we take 50 sample points, that'll probably take whatever 1920 divided by 50 is. So in other words, it's going to make a grid that is 50 by 50 that conforms to the aspect ratio of the rectangle that we just made. So if you have more sample points, it's going to look more like the image. It's going to have, the sort of conformity to the details of the image. If you have less sample points, it's going to be more sort of like abstract and wavy. And we can kind of play around with these parameters and try it in a couple different contexts. So for height, it's asking us right now for 10, this sort of default is 10 inches. That seems like a lot, but I'm going to go ahead and do it just to show you what will happen. Typically, when I'm working with something like a height field, I work at a much lower height. So, and here, I have it set to make a surface with control points, which is just, so then here is what we get. Here's our sort of image. And I'm guessing that this is probably the top of the image up here, because as I said before, it looks like the light areas are going to be high, and then the darkest areas are going to be low. So this is a super powerful tool. It's actually how I make a lot of my game terrain. If I'm working with certain algorithms, I can just make a black and white image and then have my code kind of interpret the image into a 3D object. It's good for landscape images because it really only does up and down, right? There's no sideways parameter, so you can't have something like this and then make it shift. You'd have to do that separately as a separate thing. But yeah, this is basically this is a pretty tall height field, as you can see. So I'm going to run the same function with a little bit of a lower height, and you should be able to see there just a much more subtle looking approach. So there are really two sort of maybe ways that you would use a height field. One is for making terrain, and the other is probably just for making a surface that has a lot of texture. So here you can see if we just set the height, a little bit lower, it gives us a much more sort of subtle looking surface. Okay, that's the thing. Hi. Sure, I'll show you how I do it. So I'm just going to make a little shape here with a 2D. I'm actually just using the control point curve. So I'll make it kind of like a jelly bean sort of shape. And then you need to make so this would basically be the shape that we're going to extrude. And then you need what's called a path curve. So to make the path curve, I'm going to make the path curve in a different view because in general, you get better results when two things are happening. When the path curve is perpendicular to the planar surface or perpendicular-ish to the shape that you're trying to extrude. And then also, if you have the path curve actually intersect with the base shape, that also helps. So I'm actually going to use this point right here, and then I'm just going to sort of come up here and make a curve. So you can see here that my path curve, it's not totally perpendicular, but it's perpendicular-ish, right? And the reason for that is that if it's not perpendicular, you would end up getting a flat-looking extrusion. So let's go ahead and do the extrude curve thing. So basically, I'm going to come up here to the solid menu, and I'm going to extrude planar curve along curve. Is that the function that you're talking about? Yeah. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. And then select curves to extrude, so that would be this one. And then it says select path curve near start. So they don't really say this, but what start means is the end that's near the curve that you want to extrude. So you kind of want to get in here and it doesn't have to be right on, but you basically get close. And then from there, you get your sort of curved extrusion. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay, let me look at my notes. I have another couple cool things for you. Yes. Okay, so another thing that I wanted to show you is something called cage editing. So we haven't talked a whole lot about super organic forms, but Rhino is really excellent at using them. So what we're going to do is, instead of creating a form from scratch, we're going to use a technique where you can take a form, like a sphere or an ellipsoid, or really any solid polysurface, and you can take that form and you can create a box of control points around it and then like move them around. So basically, like if you want to get something that looks like some kind of organic object that wasn't made by extruding and all the sort of like mechanistic rendering tools that we've looked at so far, this is how you do it. So I'm going to make a sphere just for simplicity's sake. And I'm just going to make like a big sphere. So nothing too special there. Real quickly, I'm going to change the rendering mode here to shaded, because we want to be able to see what's happening to our shape. And so basically, there's a two-step process to using what's called the cage editor. And the first step is creating the cage, and then the second step is actually editing with the cage. So in order to make the cage, I can come up here to transform, and then cage editing, create cage. And I'm just going to create the base in the top view, but you're basically just making a box. And it doesn't super matter a lot if you get it just right at this point, because you can move it around and rescale it afterwards. So one thing that it does ask you for is cage parameters. And I'm not honestly sure if these are the defaults or not, so you might want to just take a look at how I have this set. They might not actually be the defaults because I tend to use this function, so I may have changed it at some point. But basically, I'm asking what it's going to do is it's going to take the box and it's going to create a grid of control points. So the sort of question that you have to ask yourself here is, do I want to sort of like create big moves in the shape, or do I want to create tiny little details? If you want to create big moves sort of and distort the shape, you don't really need a whole lot of control points to do that. So that's why I have the control points set here at 3 or 4 on each side. If you wanted to maybe make a really delicate surface, sure, you could have 100 control points. I can't say I would recommend it, but it's a thing you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and click done here. And now I have my sort of box, which I'm just going to slide over this shape here. And so at this point, I basically have a sphere in a box, and I can't really do anything to it. If I maybe get a little ahead of myself and turn the control points on, I can see the control points, but when I move stuff, it's not going to be linked to the sphere, right? So that's why this next step is so important. So I'm going to come in here to transform cage editing again, and I'm going to select the option for cage edit. And now, by selecting cage edit, it will actually give me the ability to take this box, to move these control points, and to basically kind of have a somewhat kind of clay-like interaction with my sphere here. So I'm going to go to Cage Edit, and then it asks you to select the captive objects. In this case, that's the sphere. And then select the control object. In this case, that is the box. And then region to edit. I actually set this to global. So there's a little box here that says global. And basically what that means is just everything in the box is what it will select. So now, if I come in here and I grab some of these points, I can just hit the Shift key and grab multiple points. I can start to really do some damage. And this does get to be kind of fun. One thing that I like to do is to kind of, when I'm doing cage editing, is to like select multiple points at once. So we could certainly just select all the sort of top surface here, and that's going to select every single point on the top. And then we can warp the form like that. And you can basically like go crazy. You can keep going with moving these points around until you. I've seen people use this method a lot for like character modeling, like where you need something that looks like a human head, or if you need something that looks like, I don't know, like a body part, or like a rock or a pebble. All those sort of organic, well, I guess rocks are inorganic, but you get the idea, organic forms. And you can also do this method of cage editing, you can also do it with flat surface, like single surfaces. So it's not something that you can only do to solids. And I guess, yeah, it's just sort of fun in general. I keep clicking on the wrong part of the gumball here. So yeah, you can obviously go from something like regular to something highly irregular. I feel like I haven't really addressed this side, so I don't want to like leave it out. I'll try pushing these just like in the other direction. And now we're kind of getting something a little more complicated. You can also just take the entire top of the box and slide it. So yeah, it can get quite far from, the original shape. And then when you're done cage editing it, you can basically just click out of it. And in this case, I would also turn the points off. And then you have your sort of regular object. Other questions? Yeah. I'm totally, just to like kind of announce, I'm totally willing to review, like for sure. Yeah. Sure. Yep, totally. Yeah, so I think for the room, I actually started with a box solid. So, and of course that's, assuming that you want your room to be rectangular-ish. But you could start theoretically with like any solid that, had faces. So yeah, so we have the box solid here. I'm just gonna create like a really big box. Of course, you can always scale it later. So yeah, here's my sort of big box. Now, the sort of secret here is that basically what you have to do is you have to take this, it's an extrusion right now, which is a polysurface. Basically want to take it from a polysurface to a bunch of separate surfaces. And so we would use this little explode button. And then once it's exploded, you'll start to see the surface marks for each of the surfaces. But at this point, you can come in and start deleting surfaces. And basically whichever surfaces you delete is kind of totally based on your own preferences and how you have where the light is coming from, right? And that kind of thing. So we'll let you handle that, the choosing of which surfaces to delete. Great question. Yeah. A bulb? Like a light bulb? Okay. Was it a point light? Yeah, point lights can be a little tricky. Let's try sticking a point light in here and see what happens. In fact, I think I'm going to go back to my scene here, just because we'll be able to see it a little bit better. So we do have 3 point lights in here, so maybe I'll just turn kind of all the room lights off right now. Turn off the extra lamp. And so then at this point, we don't really have any lights enabled right now, so we can kind of start over. I'm going to stick a point light just like on the very tippy top of this narwhal horn. So the point light is down here, right here, and should be right there. So yeah, there's the point light. So it sounds like what you're describing is, I'm just going to select the lights quickly. It sounds like what you're describing might actually be more of an issue with the glass than the point light, because point lights are pretty, unless you turn, so definitely the intensity, if the intensity turned down, that would cause the point light not to display. There's also, I'm going to just like rattle off like 3 or 4 things that I think might be wrong. If the glass material that's around the point light doesn't have the transparency set correctly, that could potentially be a problem. And here's the last thing. There's a setting in the renderer which is this setting that basically says use lights on layers that are off. So if for some reason the layer is somehow disabled, it won't render, but there's a way to override that. Yeah, right here, basically. If those 3 things don't help, you can totally send me an email, and I can look at your file. That's probably the surefire way to figure it out. Anybody else? Okay, I got one more thing. I don't know if you've considered using text in Rhino, but there is a text object function. So if we wanted to make some text, Rhino can output text in a bunch of different formats. So it can output text as curves, which is awesome if you have like something like a blueprint or a 2-dimensional drawing that you want to send to somebody and you have notes or whatever. But if you want to have text be actually like part of your wall, like let's say maybe you want some inspirational wall art that's, we could do that whole like, so let's say we're going to make some sort of inspirational wall art. Definitely we wouldn't want to use the Arial font because inspirational wall art is almost always in a script font. So who knows? We'll see if I can find the... this is the part where you find out that I have way too many fonts on my computer. Let's see. Maybe something like this, like a really sort of scripty font. And then the height, let's say we want the height to be maybe like really big, like 12 inches. And this will actually produce solids. So if we go ahead and make this happen, we can basically just go ahead and I'm just going to move out here a little bit. So yeah, we can go ahead and just place that text there. And you can see right now it's just kind of floating around on the floor. But this basically is a collection of polysurfaces, just like any other polysurface. So it can be, just another like cool way to make form in Rhino. So you can basically take these polysurfaces, you can do anything that you would do to any other shape. So, yeah. Sure. So I think we made the sort of like wings of, sorry, I'm spinning around here. I'm not really sure where I am. Ah, yes. So I think we made these sort of wing shapes transparent, but you'll sort of may have noticed from looking at the renderings that it's a little bit ambiguous. If I look at some of these, let me just bring these back up. So this is the sort of Rhino render version, and you can see we do have some translucency there, but I didn't make them kind of fully transparent. They're just like a little bit transparent. They're translucent. So if you do want to make a shape that's like completely translucent, probably the best thing to do would be for me to go ahead and I'm going to select all of this text. So it's not sort of seeing it as text because it's, let me just lock this really quickly, and then I can grab this, get rid of it. It's kind of in the way. So probably the quickest way for me to do to deal with this is just to make a box, and I'm going to make the box sort of like block the boat, right? So we'll be able to see the boat behind it. So probably we go like that, and then up. Okay, so that is definitely going to do the job. So probably from here, we would want to start thinking about materials. So right now it looks like it's black, and that sort of makes sense because we're on the default layer and the layer color is black. But if we put a material on it, we'll be able to make it translucent and, do some other stuff. So I'm going to go over here to the Materials tab with the toothpaste. And if we make a custom material, I'm just going to start over with a new custom material instead of using the materials that I already have. I'm going to show you how to do it with a custom material, but just to let you know, the plastic and the gem and the glass are especially also good for transparency. So over here in custom, basically want to sort of scroll down here. I'll give you some more real estate here. So you should be able to just select a color and then select a transparency. So I'm going to select some sort of like offensive kind of color, just like a really bright color, so we know for sure what's going on. And I'm also now going to set the transparency. So a couple of things are happening right now. When you look at the transparency, I guess one sort of general warning that I will give you is that the rendered preview is not very good at previewing transparency. So in order for us to like really see what's going on here, we probably need to make a test render. And let me just scooch over this way a little bit. Basically what I'm trying to do is I'm scooching over a little bit to kind of have some of the scene revealed through the transparency and some of it not. So I'm having that issue that a couple of you have brought to my attention about like the rhino basically not wanting to zoom in or sort of pan. And the best way to get around that is to just select the object that you want to be at the center of your scene and then click this magnifying glass with yellow stuff in it, and it will reset your sort of zoom preview. So that seems like pretty sort of close just for a test to kind of see what we need to see. And basically what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go quickly to my render settings. I think I actually just triggered a render by accident. I just clicked on the wrong part of the thing. Yeah, stop it, go away. So I definitely want to go to my render settings because I have it set right now to do a 19-hour render. So we're not going to do that right now. So I'm going to go into my render properties. I'm going to go back to the legacy Rhino renderer. And then over here in quality, I know I'm encouraging you all to do your renders at good or final quality, but if you're sort of doing them for yourself to sort of see how things look, by all means, use the draft quality. It goes a lot faster, and it's not perfect, but it does tell you kind of what you need to know. So hopefully this render should finish in like less than a minute. So we're starting to kind of get a glimpse of what it looks like, and you can see it's definitely transparent, but really it's just a question of how much transparency you want, and to do that you just adjust the slider. You can also have, just so you know, you can have like a image texture on something and still make it transparent. It's just going to map the brightness values of the image like to the transparency. So, yeah, great question. Hi. That's a really good question. So the question was, like, if you want to stick a light inside an object, do you have to sort of hollow it out, or can it be just like a solid sphere, for example? And my short answer is, I'm just going to repeat the question so I make sure I answer it like the right way. You cannot stick a light source inside a solid. It has to be going through. Yeah, then it should be okay, but I think you might get unpredictable results. That's sort of my way of saying, like, no guarantees. Yeah, it's definitely better if you shell it out, if you have a light inside of an object. There is also like an emissive material, which is just a little bit different. If you want to turn an object into something that acts like a light source, that might be something to look into. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. So there's our draft render, by the way, and you can see that even for a draft rendering, it looks pretty good. It's just got a little bit more noise in it. So the question that we just got was, can I show you all how to sort of optimize your settings to make sure that everything snaps together? I can. I'm going to actually start with a new document because then we can kind of address settings. So let me just, I'm going to throw like a V-shaped line down here. The reason that I put the V-shaped line here is because I would really like to make a curve that sort of fits through these 3 points, okay? Just so we can kind of make sure that we're making a curve that sort of conforms to an object. So definitely, if I just grab my curve tool, right now I don't have grid snap enabled. And that's probably okay because as you can see, since I didn't have grid snap enabled when I created this, grid snap wouldn't do me very much good anyway. So the thing that we're really talking about is O-snaps. So basically the O-snaps are all down here. And you can see that the ones that I have selected are the ones that I use the most frequently. Right now I have the end point selected, so when I click over this point, I can see that it's like snapping to the end, right? So that's useful. Another one that I like to use an awful lot is midpoint. So midpoint can be really useful, just because often you want to put something in the middle of something else. So I'll go ahead and put a point there, and then maybe I'll use the midpoint of this line as well, and then the end point right here. So a couple of other things that you might want to sort of make sure are checked. I would definitely make sure that this planar form is checked, especially early on in your modeling process, because early on in your modeling process, if you're doing things like extruding or taking 2D shapes and applying other operations to them, the Rhino will ask for them to be coplanar. So you can see right now that this curve that I just made is all, flat. Does that answer your question? Okay. Hey. Uh-huh. Yeah. So C-plane is something that I don't cover in this class. I do use it myself. Basically, I think that we're not doing anything so complicated in this class that really benefits from changing your C-plane, and it can be ridiculously confusing for people who sort of aren't used to thinking about C-planes. But I can maybe tell you in the 2 minutes that we have left. Basically, right now, you can see that we're working on the C-plane is sort of fixed, right? And we have an origin that's at 0, 0. So let's just say, hypothetically, that I took this line and I made a line that was all the way up here. I could actually reset the C-plane, which you can do with this window here, where it says Set C-plane Origin. And I could reset my C-plane to align with that point. Personally, I kind of don't really mess with changing my C-plane around unless I'm working on something that's really complicated. So if I was modeling a satellite dish for my game environment, and that was an instance where I really needed to reset the C-plane because I needed to use the origin of the C-plane to do stuff, and the origin was down at the bottom where I started. But yeah, I would consider that to be an advanced topic. Yeah. Yeah. Uh-huh. So probably the best way is to use the join. So the question was for folks at home, how do you combine different surfaces to apply a texture or material to them? Probably the best way to do that is to use this join function, and that will join them into a polysurface. The other thing that I guess I just want to say real quickly about that is that with materials, you can actually use what's called you can assign your material by layer. So if I go back to our sort of big thing here, if I wanted to sort of take the entire boat and select all the objects in this layer, and then I can reassign them a material where it says use layer material. And then you can go into here and select a layer material. Basically, like here you could change from the default material to whatever material you want. So definitely that's just like yet another reason to maybe like use layers, because you can use layers as a way to organize your materials. All right, y'all, I think we're out of time. Thanks for those awesome questions, and good luck with your projects. If you do, if you run into any problems getting your project ready, please feel free to send me an email. You can email me your Rhino file, and I'm happy to take a look at it. Also, if you're really having trouble, you can reach out to me for a Zoom meeting. So yeah, and I'll see you all on Tuesday. Thanks. Bye.